Greetings. Welcome to TheQueenElle LLC. This is TheQueenElle. Thank you so much for joining me today. So this video is regarding the current shadow period of the upcoming Mercury retrograde. This will be the first Mercury retrograde of 2023. Now, Mercury went direct on January 18th. Mercury went direct from the Mercury retrograde that we had at the end of 2022. And it has been direct or moving along its orbit in the typical manner since January. So we have an upcoming Mercury retrograde that is taking place on April 21st, and it will run until May 14th, which is when Mercury will return direct. So what does retrograde mean? When a planet is in retrograde, it essentially takes a pause from going in its traditional manner along its orbit, and then it starts going in reverse or retrograde. And then at a certain period of time, depending on how long that planet's orbit is, it will return direct. So when you hear those terms, now you know what that means. Now, what does that mean for Mercury? Mercury is our planet of communication. So when Mercury is in retrograde, there are hindrances with communication with others, with our professional communication, be it a contract or some type of business interaction that you have with others. So it's important to note that when Mercury goes into retrograde, which happens several times each year, that you may experience some type of communication block or miscommunication between yourself and others. And it's not so much that, well, communication is going to be bad, we're in Mercury retrograde. It's essentially knowing, just being aware that that is what's taking place, and mainly to not enter into new agreements or contractual relationships during Mercury retrograde if you can avoid it. Now, things pop up, all the time. So sometimes we're not able to avoid that type of agreement. But if you're able to avoid it, then it's recommended that you hold off on any new contractual relationship during Mercury retrograde. And then once Mercury goes direct, then you can return to those things. Now, why is that? So essentially, it just means that you should just be very mindful of the potential for there to be some sort of miscommunication or misrepresentation when it comes to your contractual relationships, as well as your communication with others. Okay, now what is a shadow period? So when we talk about the moon energy, for instance, the shadow period is a few days before, a few days after when that moon or lunar phase takes place. But with Mercury retrograde, that shadow period is typically up to 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after Mercury goes into retrograde and then returns direct. So since Mercury retrograde takes place this year, April 21st, for the first time this year rather, the shadow period started April 7th. So what that means is the energy that will take place during Mercury retrograde may be felt as early as now. So it's just a preparation phase. So any contractual relationships, by all means, feel free to move forward with them during the shadow period. So let's see where Mercury is right now. Mercury is currently in the sign of Taurus. So that's an earth sign. Taurus is known for being very steadfast, loyal energy, somewhat stubborn because of, that bull-headed energy, and being a fixed sign, but definitely very loyal, steadfast, grounded energy, being an earth sign. And the other planets that we have in the sign of Taurus right now, Uranus and Venus, also in the sign of Taurus. It really just depends on where your Mercury is in your chart. If Mercury is in the first house of your birth chart, that is the house of you. It's yourself, and um, essentially what makes you who you are. Pardon the sounds in the background, such as is family life, right? So, um, if you have, let's say, Mercury in your first house of your birth or natal chart, so this is at the time that you were born, that snapshot of the time you were born, then this Mercury retrograde that's getting ready to take place, you may feel some type of communication block with regard to your sense of self and who you are. So that's just something to think about. If it's in the sign for your career and your aspirations and your goals, then you may run into a communication barrier with regard to that aspect of your life. If it has to do with your eighth house, your sense of sensuality and sexuality, then you would potentially have a communication barrier within that house. So it really depends on where Mercury resides in your birth chart, and also what sign as well. So like I said, Mercury's in the sign of Taurus right now. I would recommend really just looking at your birth or natal chart to help you out. Once we get right before the official date of Mercury retrograde, I will do a Mercury retrograde video and talk about how this retrograde will affect different signs in different houses, as well as doing a tarot spread to lend more information on it. But I did just want to hop on here and discuss how the shadow period may affect us. So also, depending on where Mercury is in your chart, it may not affect you as strongly as some others. Okay. And while Mercury is in retrograde, for those several weeks, it will transit through other houses. So then, depending on your sign, it may shift a little bit. And so we'll discuss that at length as well. But just know that as it stands right now, Mercury is in Taurus, Mercury's in the shadow period, and getting closer to Mercury retrograde. So it's just a heads up. Like I said, stay tuned and we will discuss this in more length. Thank you so much for joining me, and definitely check out my weekly videos. Like I said, Ashe, peace.